Oh, Hell and Mesh's Kingdom, it's truly a pinnacle of the monk build. This build can clear all the content in the game, including the last and most powerful pinnacle boss. Clear maps very fast. And this build does not just melt bosses, it basically erases them from existence. So let's jump straight into it. To make great build for your Path of Exile 2 adventures, you need 3 things. You need to clear maps fast, you need to be able to defeat bosses and survive. This build can do everything. That's my role-playing build, and I'm role-playing as 4 elements monk. I decided to create a build that can do lightning, cold and fire damage at the same time. And mostly it's working by combining smart passive skill tree with the right skill gems with support skill gems. So let's check on our main skill, Ice Strike. It's a combination of multiple strikes. Basically you're doing 1, 2, 3. 2 normal strikes followed by a last third strike, which will do a lot more damage. That's our main and single attacking ability. You just hold the button and attack. But that's not only our single damaging ability, also we get charged stuff. After freezing enemies at least once, you will get some power charges, and then we can activate power stuff. This will give us range abilities that can shoot nice lightnings at enemies and they will blow up. And as you can see, whole screen blowing up. This because we get heralds combination that will basically clear the screens for you. So we don't need to do a lot of attacks with this build, basically just one single strong hit is more than enough to clear whole screen. But before we jump into heralds, let's find out how our basic abilities will work. So, Ice Strike. It converts your physical damage to cold damage with more attack speed. This means so if you got high physical damage on yourself, you will do pretty nice chunk of damage to your enemies. Supportive gems in this skill is Martial Tempo for more attack speed. More attack speed, more damage per second. That's pretty straightforward, and also it helps us getting more combo for other skills. More on that later. Then we got Concentrated Effect. We're dealing more area damage and less area of effect. This gives us a lot more DPS for this skill, and that's pretty powerful supportive gem. As you can see, my DPS right now at 300,000 and right now it's 420, which is pretty significant boost for just one supportive gem. That's because we got more. More is multiplicative damage amplifier basically in this game, so if something says it increasing your damage, it will be applied to your initial damage calculation, basically added to it. But more means it will be added after all calculations, so it will basically do more damage. But whatever, we got Primal Ornament, which will deal more weapon elemental damage, and also that's very powerful gem, really important for our build. For next slot I'm using Rage. It gives me ability to gain Rage on melee hit, and Rage is also multiplicative damage amplifier. At maximum Rage you can have 30% more damage, and that's applied to all damage you deal, which is significant improvement. The last gem I'm using is Ice Bite. Our attacks gaining 35% of damage as cold damage for 3 seconds on freezing an enemy. Basically you will freeze enemies a lot with Ice Strike, that's why that's a great supportive gem. We will also freeze enemies with our Herald abilities, so we can use Ice Bite on Heralds. But why I'm using it on Ice Strike? Because you can't freeze bosses with Heralds of Ice and Thunder. That's why Ice Bite versus bosses is a great supportive gem on our Ice Strike. So, our second skill is Charged Stuff. This skill can be activated only by consuming power charges, as I told you, and it will add lightning damage to our attacks. To be able to use this gem, you need Resonance on your passive skill tree. It will change how you gain power charges, and you will gain power charges instead of frenzy charges. And to gain frenzy charges, we will use Combat Frenzy. So that's Spirit Reservations buff skill, and basically you will gain frenzy charges when you freeze enemies. That's it. On Combat Frenzy we get Parafusion to have chance for additional charges, and I got Herbalism to increase recovery from life flasks. But let's get back to charged stuff. So what we got here? We got Persistence, and it really helps to keep this charged stuff on all the time, especially against bosses. But now comes really important stuff. Why we use charged stuff, or I better say what is the main task for charged staff in our build? And main task is to inflict shock upon enemies. Basically, we're using overcharge. We're increasing magnitude of shocks we're inflicting with the skill. Also, we're using conduction. Supportive skills will have more chance to shock. And shock is a great ailment on enemies. Shock is ailment that causes the target to take 20% increased damage. With increased magnitude, we're really dealing loads and loads more damage upon bosses when they're shocked while we're using charged stuff. So that's really a great way to deal more damage to enemies, especially bosses. But when you unlock additional slots on the skill, you can use something like this. Basically, that's what I'm using. Lightning exposure. We're inflicting shock, but also now we can inflict lightning exposure, which will lower resistance of enemies to lightning. Even if they have zero resistance, it will basically amplify damage we deal. And we will amplify it even more with next support gem, Strip Away. Exposure applied by skills will have 30% increased effect. So that's our combination for main skills that we will use as basic attack. But now let's jump to the combinations that we will use to clear screens. To clear screens, you need combination of Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. Both of them is payoff skills, and payoff skills have powerful extra effects when hitting enemies inflicted with specific debuffs. And they often consuming debuff, but they cannot inflict the same debuff they interact with. So, Herald of Ice, it will interact with frozen enemies by creating big ice explosion. This means this skill cannot freeze enemies itself. So, instead of freezing, we will use lightning infusion inside. It will lower our cold and fire damage, but it will give us more lightning damage on this skill. This means this skill can inflict shock upon enemies, which is really great. The next supportive gem I'm using is Long Shot. Most of the time, the chain reaction of Ice and Thunder will go for the wall screen, and at the last parts of the screen we want to deal more and more damage, so Long Shot is a great way to deal more damage to enemies standing far away. Also, we want to cover more area with the skill, so Magnified Effect is what we're going for, to get more area of effect for this skill. And last but not least, we gain in 35% of damage as lightning damage after killing shocked enemy with this skill. Innervate, that's the supportive gem we're using here. Herald of Ice works in combination with Herald of Thunder. After killing shocked enemies with attack damage, we get in buff that will give us next attacks with lightning bolts, with even more lightning damage. But again, we want these lightning bolts to deal another type of damage, so we get in cold infusion inside. This will give us cold damage for Herald of Thunder. This means it can freeze enemies, but damage won't be really high, cold damage. That's why glaciation is what we need next. We want to increase freeze build-up with this skill. And the more damage you inflict, the more freeze build-up will happen. Next supportive gem we're using is Ambush. This will give us more chance to critical hit against enemies that are on full life. So this combination will work like this. Basically, Herald of Ice will shatter enemies that are frozen by our Ice Strike. At the same time, it will shock them. And when shocked enemies are dying, we get in Cold Infusion, we get in Herald of Thunder effect, and basically we get in chain reaction of freezing and lightning strikes with critical hits and more lightning damage. All enemies is frozen, shattered, etc, etc. Basically that's a great combination for clearing screens. Last but not least, we got Shock Siphon on Herald of Thunder. So that's kinda like last resort stuff over here, but sometime when you're low on energy shield, this will help you to survive some ambushes of enemies. Basically, when we deal a killing blow to shocked enemy, we recover 4% of energy shield. This helps a lot in some situations. So now you know how we clear the screens, and it will work just with combination of supportive gems, your skill gems, as well as right skill tree. More on that later, but now how we deal with bosses. So for bosses we're dealing with simple combination. We just need to make 4 ice strikes, so basically 1, 2, 3 and 4. After 4 strikes we get in combination to put down a bell. And after putting down the bell, we shoot in this ice blast that will blow up the bell and finish down the boss basically. That's how it looks in the game. 1, 2, 3, 4, bell, deleted. Basically, yeah, just simple as that. And we're using basic stuff with no bonuses at all. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So, the combination, basically Tempest Bell. Tempest Bell is awesome skill, you put down the bell, but it requires you to have combo, and combo is pretty simple, just need to make 4 strikes and you will get this combo. The bell will have 2 ways to deal damage. It is impact damage, basically you're doing 385% of your attack damage from your stuff when you just landing the bell, so it's also some nice damage, but most damage comes from shockwave. Right now I'm doing 257%. Again, this percent is based on your skill level, so if yours is lower you will just need to upgrade it a little bit and you will have the same numbers. How shockwave works? Basically you will have more area of effect per knockback triggering hit would have cost, and we knock back enemies when we deal critical hit with quarter stuff. Then we're dealing more damage per elemental alignment afflicting the bell. So, if we deal, for example, like lightning damage on bell, deal 30% more damage. But if we deal lightning and ice damage, for example, it will deal 60% more damage. But if we add fire to the mix, then we're dealing almost 100% more damage, basically doubling our damage output. And that's what you're seeing when I melt bosses with like 20 million DPS per second. We're dealing like all alignments at once. High level fully upgraded Tempest Bell with 20 quality will have something like this. It will have sustain for 28 hits right now for me, and that's what we want to work on. Basically want to have more sustain for the skill actually. That's why on this build I really like focusing on skill level. So what do we get on Tempest Bell? First of all, I got Overabundance, supportive gem. Overabundance is insane, it gives us +1 to limit. Basically how it works. If you don't have Overabundance, you get your combination, you place your bell, and then you can't get any more combo before the bell expires. But with Overabundance, you can place the bell, you make 4 strikes, and you can place another bell immediately. So that's really a great and best skill you can have on the Tempest Bell. Now we just want to deal more and more and more damage with the skill. That's why I'm using Heft to have more maximum physical damage. Then I got Heavy Swing to have, or better I said, deal 35% more melee physical damage, but the skill will have less attack speed. Yeah, that's not a problem because Tempest Bell don't have any attack speed at all. It triggers damage when we hit it. So then another gem is really useful is Soul Sieve. We're leeching physical damage as mana when we're hitting. Basically we'll have a little bit of problems with Monk when you're playing this build sometime, but I will explain how to get rid of these problems. And this helps a lot. I'm not using it right now, so as you can see I got it on my quarter staff strike right now and I'm not using it at all. Why? Because my bell basically got deleted in a matter of seconds and I can't deal any physical damage to it and get my mana back basically. So what I'm using instead, I'm using Inspiration. I want the skill to have less cost so I can put bell all the time. Because high level bell just costs a lot of mana to place. And last but not least is Close Combat. It will deal more damage to enemies within 1 meter of you. So that's basically another amplification damage for our bell. Now, how are we actually doing damage with the bell? Normal idea is to place the bell and start hitting it with Ice Strike, but that's not what we want to do. We want to hit it with something that do a lot more damage in matter of seconds. Basically this Ice Blast. And to do this Ice Blast we got Elemental Invocation. How it works, it's pretty easy and straightforward. It's a meta skill, so it needs to gain energy to be able to be activated basically. So you get an energy when you freeze, ignite or shock enemy. We can do all of this stuff in this build, so we can easily gain energy on bosses, on enemies, on any like basically creature you will see. What are we gathering energy for? We're gathering energy for Eye of Winter. So this skill using intelligence, and for this build you want to focus more on nice mix of intelligence and dexterity. Don't worry if you can't have high level spell right now, just wait until you can get better gear and get better stats. You can basically play this build with lower level of your skills pretty easily. Eye of Winter is the skill that you never want to upgrade in terms of quality. Basically, it's pretty basic Eye of Winter and that's it. Why you don't want to have quality on the skill? Because it will increase the speed at which this ball is traveling, basically. And we don't want to make this ball travel, we want to stay it in the place and hit the bell. So, supportive gems for this skill is Deceleration. First, it basically will have less projectile speed. That's what we want and that's insanely overpowered stuff for our combination. Then we get in Chain. Supportive skill will chain 1 time. It will deal less damage with hits, but we don't care about damage almost at all. We care about like dealing hits to the bell and the bell will deal the damage for us. So Chain is great stuff for this projectile skill. And last but not least is Cold Exposure. So it will deal critical hits anyway, and when it's dealing critical hits, it will inflict cold exposure, exposing enemy for cold damage we deal. And when this amounts of debuff hits bosses, we basically melt them. That's basically how we melt bosses. Now, the last part is our survival. As you can see, I got a lot of extra energy shield thanks to Grim Fist. It works pretty easy. You defeat enemies and there will be a white spirits after them. So you see white spirits over here. You touch them and you will gain energy shield. It will recharge your energy shield or give you a layer of protection on top. So in my experience, what you want to aim for is around 4.5k to survive basically everything in this game. Right now I'm running rarity build to just test some things out and have fun, and I'm feeling fine with almost 4k. You can easily get even more, so depending on what you want. Do you want to clear bosses in 0.5 second or in 1 second? You can sacrifice a little bit of your damage and get a lot more energy shield easily, and I provided skill trees to basically defensive and protective options in my max roll guide, so make sure to check this out, because I won't go over every passive skill tree node right now. I will basically explain only most important stuff, what you need to make this build work. But first of all, let's get back to our survival. So, Grim Fist. What we want over here is we want clarity. That's the first most important stuff. It will increase your mana regeneration while the skill is active. It requires a little bit of extra reservation, but that's what we want to have all the time. Another one is precision. It will require you 10 more spirit reservation to activate. It's really useful against evasive monsters, but it's not like most important stuff for this build and you can definitely sacrifice it. Total spirit I'm running right now is 250 thanks to my gear that I will explain in the next section, but again you can sacrifice around like 20-25 spirits pretty easily. Another part of our survival is Wind Dancer. So Wind Dancer is insane, it gives you buffs, it gives more evasion per stage. Basically every 1.2 seconds you will get more and more evasion. Pretty nice and powerful stuff. When you get hit, this skill actually hits enemies. And that's what's so cool. Actually, you don't even need to hit enemies in time to defeat them. For example, you're frozen, enemies surround you, hit you, and when they finally hit you, yeah, they've been destroyed even while you're not attacking them. That's because Wind Dancer activates, dealing damage, and this damage also triggering Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ice, and basically we destroy the whole screen while not attacking. So, sockets for the skill is Culling Strike first. This skill will have Culling Strikes against rare or unique enemies. Basically it will finish them off if they are on low health. Your Herald doesn't finish elite enemy, it will finish them off. Then we also want to use Unbreakable. Unbreakable is insane, gives you more stun threshold, basically it's completely free, it doesn't require you to have more spirit reservation, just always use Unbreakable. Next one is Blind. When enemies hit you, they will be blinded, and when they blinded, they will have less chances to hit you again, which will give you more time to replenish stacks of Wind Dancer and get more evasion, which is basically unlimited loop of evasion and survival for us. And last but not least is Wind Wave. Basically, when you're stunned while using the skill, it will trigger Wind Wave, which will blow up and knock back enemies around you. Very useful, again, you won't be stunned and stun locked in a corner. When you stunned, you push enemies away, then you roll and evade them easily. And I guess it's time to check out our gear. So this gear costs a lot right now at current rates in Divines, but what you can do right now is to drop a like for this video and drop a comment that you want to see 10 Exile build that I'm making right now, and basically we'll see it in upcoming days. It's truly amazing how this build works even with almost no gear, or basically like cheap gear from vendors. You don't need like extra and stuff that costs a lot. So anyway, let's see what we're aiming for in the late game with this build. Let's start with our weapon. I got long quarter staff because I rolled it pretty good. It's pretty nice and powerful, and what you're looking for in quarter staffs, you're actually looking for more lightning damage. So you want this prefix with adds some lightning damage. I got extremely high roll from 10 to 177 lightning damage, and that's why I'm using it. Also, I got really nice physical damage roll. That's basically two rolls you're looking for in prefixes. You're looking for nice lightning damage and nice increased physical damage. That's most important ones. Of course, you can have extra fire, extra cold damage, you can have extra elemental damage also. More on that in the video for one Exiled. For suffixes, basically we're looking for critical damage bonus and critical hit chance. That's our most important stuff that will give us more damage. But also you're looking for level 2 melee skills. Melee skills is basically skills we're using, and it will increase our damage a lot. At the same time, it will increase your mana consumption a lot. So for quality of life, don't go for level of melee skills. I'm going for it because I got secrets how we can survive, and basically you're looking for videos on the screen right now. I'm not having problems with mana at all, and I will explain you how I'm doing it in a matter of seconds. But for now, another suffixes we're looking on a stick is basically attack speed, and that's it. So critical damage bonus, critical hit chance, more attack speed. That's what you're looking for. Or any other like damage amplifications. When you're looking for stuffs on the market especially, you will see a lot of extra physical damage runes inside. You don't want them. What you want is more critical damage, so soul cores for critical damage, which is like pretty cool because this build focus on critical damage actually, and that's why we're doing a lot of damage. But most important, the soul cores will be multiplicative, so they kind of dealing more critical damage, giving you more critical damage. It's not like 12% when you have high critical damage, it will be around like even like 20 or 30% depending on your build, like final build and final gear. But another really important and powerful soul chorus that will give you more elemental damage with attacks. Actually, I'm using a mix of those, so I'm using a little bit of critical damage bonus, a little bit of elemental damage with attacks. The next really important part for this build is our gloves. Gloves is hands of wisdom and action, and they are pretty good. They give me more attack damage per 10 intelligence, more lightning damage especially, and more attack speed per dexterity. So basically stack a lot of dexterity, stack a lot of intelligence, and you'll have nice damage bonuses. I got pretty nice implicit for these gloves. I'm getting cold damage penetration, which is really cool since we're doing cold damage. It's pretty nice gloves. Again, they will give you nice damage boosts when you acquire them, but you actually don't need them. There's nice substitutions for normal gloves when you're doing this build. I will show you in the video for making 10 Exile build for this monk. The next item is the last item I got over here, and it's Ingenuity Belt. This belt will give us more bonuses gained from equipped rings. What you want on rings is basically some resistances also, but the rings is really important for this build too. So first ring I got is Spirit Circle Breach Ring. It's basic breach ring, and it's pretty ideal breach ring. You really need to hunt for something like this, and what we got over here is increased lightning damage, increased cold damage, and added lightning damage to attacks. That's basically what you're looking for in prefixes. You want more lightning, more cold damage, and more lightning damage to attacks. Lightning damage to attacks increases potential of this build a lot, and that's basically what you're looking for on the rings. For suffixes, look for your resistances. And second ring is basically the same, lightning damage to attacks, more cold, more lightning damage, plus 2 elemental resistances, and also leeching physical damage as mana. That's what you want to look on rings. For left one I got life regeneration per second, so that's not ideal roll, but that's fine. But leeching physical damage as mana is what we need to actually sustain mana for this build, especially if you're using something with more level 2 melee skills. And that's what I'm using on my amulet. So my amulet looking like this: increased spell damage, increased maximum energy shield, and increased spell and bonus to maximum mana. Not ideal prefixes, but what you want actually increased energy shield. Increased energy shield is great on prefixes, more mana is also okay. For implicit, try to look for amulet that don't have spirit. Basically that's awful amulet actually, because I can't use spirit from my gear beside my body armor, but that's fine. Still, this amulet got nice bonus to elemental resistances and fire resistance. That's what I'm looking on amulet. If you're okay on your resistances, maybe you got nice boots and like body armor for example, then you can find amulet with bonus to critical damage and critical hit chance. That will be ideal amulet, with level of melee skills, critical damage and critical hit chance for damage purposes. But again, as you can see, I don't have any of those and my damage is pretty okay-ish, I would say, pretty okay-ish. Now, boots. For boots, just look for something with intelligence, dexterity, your preferred resistances that your build need right now, that your character need right now, and just look for higher energy shield. Also, again, look for movement speed. More movement speed means you will travel distance faster, clear maps faster. For helmet, basically the same idea. You can look for intelligence, dexterity and critical hit chance if you want more damage, or you can have more resistances on helmet if you wish to. And for armor, you need to look for armor that have something around 1100 evasion rating and like 450 energy shield. So that's it. Again, dexterity intelligence is the main stats for us to stack and get more damage. You can have nice resistance on the armor. I have chaos resistance. You don't need chaos resistance for this build, but I just don't have any better armor. So now, how the build works, basically what is most important stuff on passive skill tree. Again, you will see full passive skill tree in Baldurs Gate with bunch of like extra roads for more damage or extra stuff, but that's most important parts. Basically, most important of course is resonance to gain power charges, but you already know it. Another node I picked is chaos inoculation. Maximum lives become 1, but we are immune to chaos damage, which frees up slots on our gear. Basically, we don't need chaos resistance. And internal use, since we can't use life flasks, that's a nice node over here. So basically we can use our life flasks to regenerate our energy shield. So we begin every critical node over here. This one is great for more critical damage bonus, and I'm ignoring critical hit chance on most of them right now. Deadly force, basically for the jugular, more intelligence, more dexterity, more damage. That's basically what we're looking for over here. More critical damage, of course. For survival, make sure to go here on the top right part. A lot more energy shield and evasion. This part for energy shield and evasion is also very nice and useful. And there's one more over here. And if you want like a full protection, you just go in the middle and get more evasion and energy shield. If you don't need more protection, you can go like me into more movement speed over here. You will see on max roll, basically in damage roads, I'm using freeze build up and essence of the mountain for more lightning damage. As you can see, like increase in cold damage is a really big one over here and more freeze build up. Same goes over here for lightning damage, but that's just a little bit overkill. We got a bunch of cool stuff over here. So let me explain how this works basically. That's a magic of the build. Magic. Elemental damage over here. Elemental damage is not like most powerful damage booster for us, but here we get 30% increased elemental damage if we shocked an enemy recently. We can shock. You already know we can shock with Herald, with charge stuff, for example. Then we get increased elemental damage if we shield an enemy recently. So we can basically do one hit with our Ice Strike and enemy will be chilled. Also I got increased elemental damage if we ignited enemy recently. So how do we ignite enemies? How do we ignite enemies with this build? And the secret lies over here. Over here we got Javel Socket, and that's the Javel that called Controlled Metamorphosis Diamond. This dropped from Bridge Boss, and it affects passives in medium ring. So that's the ring you're looking for, medium ring. And as you can see, there's a large ring around, it's called medium ring, and we can allocate some points over here. So I'm allocating electric amplification from time to time, damage penetrates lightning resistance, and increasing lightning exposure effect. Insanely powerful stuff, like very powerful. I will allocate it at 98 probably, but I switched it for more intelligence. Since I switch gear a lot right now, I just need a little bit of intelligence. I don't have intelligence on all my gear, but you can easily like put this node, and it's really powerful for this build. But most importantly, you need this one, Stormbreaker, increased damage for each type of elemental alignment on the enemy. Again, we got 15% more damage for cold ailment, for lightning ailment, and for fire ailment. Basically for chill, freeze, shock. And also for ignite, yeah. We're getting 4 stacks of this. Again, how we can inflict ignite? You can have stuff with fire damage, but I don't have one, and I got climate change, yeah. We're increasing freeze build-up. We will freeze enemies really fast, and gaining 25% of cold damage as extra fire damage against frozen enemies. Basically, when I freeze enemy, I'm starting to deal fire damage, and we will ignite the enemy, and the enemy will take more and more and more and more damage. Our damage will increase like by insane amounts, and that's how this build hits like 2 million DPS on calculator. So over here 2 million from just 300 is pretty easy achievable. Seeing Eyes is really important, increasing freeze build up and increasing damage with hits against frozen enemies. Enemy will be frozen, will take more damage from our hits, and more damage will basically be amplified by this stuff. And that's how this build deals damage. Damage should be critical to deal even more damage, so we got like again lots of critical damage bonuses, and that's basically how the build works. So also nice protective part over here, enhanced reflexes, more evasion rating and more dexterity. And for our Invoker skill tree, you can use Anti-Shell Rage. That's really useful to like melt your bosses, and very useful if you're fighting against like Breach boss, for example. It gives like a lot more damage. Unbound Avatar is insane. Why I'm not using it? So, while it's useful against guys like Breach boss, for example, you can't get Unbound Avatar against Ritual boss. I'm using Rituals lately, and against Rituals you just want more flat damage. I'm using I Am the Blizzard, more damage as extra cold damage, and that's like pretty basic, straightforward stuff to increase our damage and deal more damage to him as cold damage. Important part is over here, Lead Me Through Grace. You gain more spirit per energy shield and evasion rating on your body armor. So that's basically how we get so much spirit to use everything. And last one goes over here right now. Sunder My Enemies. Critical hits ignore non-negative elemental resistance. Very nice and useful on maps with elemental resistances, basically. We deal a lot of critical hits, this helps us clear those maps. And that's basically how you build the most broken and crazy monk you can probably make in Path of Exile 2. I hope you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch other cool videos on the screen right now, and see you there.